Bringing news from our neighbors in Eswatini. To be specific, political unrest in that country has meant that NGOs operating in Eswatini are not able to provide the kind of services that they would necessarily provide to people on the ground. We speak to one organization that works with people in rural communities, and that's the Vuvulane Orphans and Vulnerable Children Association. We are joined by the organization's founder, and that is Mr. Khulekani Msweli, board secretary, of Vuvulane Orphans and Vulnerable Children's Outreach Foundation. Thank you very much, Ngwane, for your time this afternoon. Perhaps let's start with the situation in the country. What do we know about what has happened in the past 24 hours?
Thank you very much, Dudu, for the time. At the moment, there is a relative sense of calm within the past 24 hours, but as much as we say it's relative, so much more is still simmering underneath.
A lot is simmering underneath. You do a lot of work with young people and vulnerable people in rural areas. Talk us through some of these social ills that the people in these spaces that you're operating in go through.
It's a lot, really, because we are where we are, where the country is going through a political upheaval because of those social ills which have been ignored by the current government for many, many years. So as much as at the moment we are seeing so many deaths and so many bullet wounds amongst the civilians and so many citizens who've been maimed, including a lot of youth and children, I believe that the international community has to be aware that such occurrences are not really new in Eswatini. It's just the drastic measures which have been taken of recently, which make it a bit shocking. So some of us working on the ground have, throughout the years, witnessed a lot of injustice happening to a lot of young people, happening to the elderly, especially in rural communities. Therefore, all these situations have allowed for the situation we're seeing right now to be what it is, meaning that the lack of service delivery, the lack of scholarships, the lack of adequate access to health care, it has all really made us as citizens of Eswatini feel like second-class citizens because the wealth of the country has not been shared accordingly. Yet, what is being produced in the country really can fulfill the majority of us. So for us, and for us as an organization, having witnessed some of these atrocities happening to some of the young people whom we assist in our communities, we have been highly, highly condemning such acts because they are close to being barbaric and they are not of this time.
A lot of people would very well argue that with Eswatini's potential and very intimate population, it has the potential to be the Singapore of Africa, if you will. I'd like to talk about the work that you do, right? So the young people who participated in the pro-democracy protest, some of whom were shot at, some of whom were detained, and some of whom have subsequently succumbed to their wounds. We understand that you have provided some sort of financial support to the parents and to some of these children who cannot afford hospital bills.
That is absolutely correct, Dudu. So within our organization, since the uprisings began at the end of June, our organization had to take a drastic step in offering assistance in partnership with Solidarity Eswatini, the Eswatini Solidarity Fund, Pumelela. So we really had to take action because we saw something we've really seen, but at a lower scale. So at the moment, I like to deal with numbers. I saw last night when you interviewed our Minister of Commerce, Minister Mangoba, he was not dealing with numbers, but fairly guessing things. So with our organization up to date, we've been able to disperse assistance to 56 individuals. This is including 4 family members whose children were shot dead by the army and the police, and then majority of the 56 have a median age of 30, which means all of these atrocities are happening to very young people. And we've dispersed approximately 85,500 rand to assist with their medical bills and funerals. So this amount really, it's an amount which should have been catered for by our government, whereby up to now all these 56 individuals have not in any way been assisted by our government through their medical bills and funeral coverage. And also just to add on, Dudu, as we speak, there are 8 children who've been arrested in our neighboring community in Sheula, and have been charged with terrorism, murder, and arson, which we highly condemn because these are children who have decided to stand up and speak up for their right to education, for their right to scholarship, for their right to also have their members of parliament freed from imprisonment just because they spoke out on their behalf, and currently 2 of our members of parliament are imprisoned.
When you say young children, one assumes it's people under the age of 18?
Yes, it's definitely under the age of 18. Even within the 56 which I had mentioned, the one who was murdered and whom we made a donation to the family was as young as 9 years old. So these are not just figures where thumb sucking, but these are actual figures, and these are statistics which are supported by death certificates and also supported by medical forms which show that a lot of these young people were admitted into hospitals for bullet wounds, which is absolutely unacceptable in a modern democracy. Hence why a lot of students, a lot of citizens of Eswatini are calling for democratic change in Eswatini.
Just for the benefit of our viewers, Vuvulane Orphans and Vulnerable Children's Outreach Foundation does in Eswatini what Gift of the Givers does in South Africa. That then makes me wonder, Mr. Msweli, how your work has been impacted in delivering services to the much-needed people that you access in rural areas.
Yes, it's absolutely right, although at a much smaller scale than Gift of the Givers. But yes, our work is really put on hold because it is our wish in most cases when we carry out some of these community service jobs to actually meet the people, go to them in person. But it's been absolutely difficult at times, hence why we ended up even resorting to making mobile money transfers, because even getting to some of those families has been hard. And some of the citizens who've been victims, or shall I say survivors of these atrocities, have been very scared, even for some of us to come to them, because the police and the army have been hounding them night and day in their homes. So there's a sense of fear even for us as aid providers or supporters in communities to be out there, because there's always a feeling of your head being hunted for, which we do not understand. How can that be such when the king of Eswatini has seemingly been saying he is calling for dialogue, and even last night Minister Mangoba was saying that the king is willing to relinquish power, but we cannot see that, because the more the citizens are honestly calling for a sense of reform, they are only met with a lot of brutal force from the police and the army through live shooting and tear gassing, which we all saw online on Wednesday. So it's really, really hard for us to provide adequate service delivery to some of the citizens that we offer our service to.
Thank you very much for bringing us up to speed with developments in Eswatini and around the work that you do. Vuvulane Orphans and Vulnerable Children's Outreach Foundation Board Secretary Khulekani Msweli. Thank you.